Hi guys, it's Chris again with my very special co-host. Say hi, Aidan.
Hi, Aidan.
Bringing you part 3 of 4, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. This one's titled Wolverine. Let's hear what Rob has to teach us about the almighty Deadpool. React.
So as we pick up with Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe Part 3, what we're going to find is that Deadpool is not arbitrarily killing superheroes and supervillains. That Deadpool actually has an underlying motivation here. Not only that, Deadpool has become aware of something that nobody else is aware of, that nobody else seems to know. And what we'll see as we progress through this comic is that some individuals will discover what it is that Deadpool knows, but they'll discover it at the cost of either their own sanity or the result of their, the cost of their own lives. But what we'll also do in this story is we're going to bounce back and forth between Deadpool and Taskmaster. Now, it's not going to be a direct confrontation. In fact, it's just going to be Taskmaster as he's tracking down Deadpool. And we'll also, jump into Deadpool as he is going about or continuing his goal of the end result that he's set for himself. But as we start this story, we pick up with Taskmaster as he's tracking down Deadpool. And of course, we see that Taskmaster's been tracking Deadpool for several days. We of course see that Venom has been killed by Deadpool. He's strung about a bell tower, and it seems as though Deadpool has most likely used the reverberating sound of a bell to presumably kill Venom. We exactly don't know how it was that this happened, but we also see that Deadpool has killed both Jamie Madrox and the Green Goblin. But one of the interesting things here is that Taskmaster arrives at a scene where it appears that Deadpool had killed the Power Pack. And what Taskmaster tells us is that even he, despite the fact that he's a villain, has his own code of conduct, has his own moral code, even if it does cause him to come into conflict with superheroes. But the moral code that he has, and most likely the moral code of virtually all supervillains, with the exception of the most insane, is that they don't kill kids. And so the fact that Deadpool had killed the Power Pack indicates that he's beyond any chance of redemption. And so as Taskmaster tells us, that if there was any question of the fact that Deadpool should die, that question's been removed from the equation. And so there's really no alternative except to kill Deadpool. From here, we pick up with Deadpool as he's captured Professor Charles Xavier. And what he does is tell Charles Xavier to wake up, indicating that he's maybe held Charles Xavier for quite some time. And what we also know is that it seems as though maybe the X-Men are hunting for Charles Xavier, but we don't exactly know where they're at this point in time. But what Deadpool tells Charles Xavier is that he can sleep when he's dead, and that it won't be that long before he's dead anyway, of course telling us that Deadpool intends to kill Charles Xavier relatively soon. And of course, once Charles Xavier comes to, he begins to question Deadpool. And he asks Deadpool what it is that he wants, what it is that he's doing, and that he's hurt so many people. And this is when Deadpool begins to touch on the idea that he knows something that nobody else knows. And what he tells Charles Xavier is that no one really feels anything. They don't really feel anything. That for him, it doesn't really matter if any of them die, because in the end, it doesn't matter, that there's really no purpose in any of them existing. Now, of course, this seems to be the insane ramblings of Deadpool, but as we'll learn later on, there's actually a method, there's sanity behind this claim that he's making. But what he does is he stabs Charles Xavier in the leg, and then tells Charles Xavier to say something. And so what Charles Xavier does is he calls the X-Men. He calls the X-Men to his location, to the building that he's in. And so from here, we switch to Emma Frost, Cyclops, to Cannonball, and to Pixie. And what we do is we see that almost immediately after they arrive, that Cyclops is, I guess his head is encased in some kind of gelatinous material, or at the very least it seems gelatinous. But as Emma Frost explains it to us, that the material, while it started off as a gelatinous material, had begun to solidify, and that it's something that just won't come off the head of Cyclops. She says that her concern here is that Cyclops won't be able to breathe as fast as it's hardening, and so what Cyclops does is he begins to try to blast the material off of his head using his optic beam. But for Cyclops, the problem here is that this material is solid to the point where it can withstand the optic beams of Cyclops. And so what happens is that as the energy from Cyclops' optic beams build up inside of this case, that it ultimately explodes. And when it does, it blows up in the same fashion as a bomb, which kills Cannonball, Emma Frost, Cyclops, and of course Pixie. And so we transition back to Deadpool and Charles Xavier. And Deadpool again makes a comment with regards to a lot of the fans of the X-Men, and asks the question of why it was that Charles Xavier had always felt the need to continually expand the roster of the X-Men. Why it is that he couldn't simply just stick with a small group of people. But what we also see is that Deadpool transitions, or I guess shows Charles Xavier what's going on with Colossus, Gambit, and Rogue. And of course we see Gambit telling us that they've been in worse spots than they're in right now, that this entire building seems to be some kind of death trap, but they'll find a way out. But before they're able to move any further, all three of them are electrocuted. They're totally incinerated, and we switch back to Deadpool and Charles Xavier. Xavier. And what Deadpool says here is that he doesn't think he'll be getting his security deposit back because it'll be so incredibly hard to clean out the stench of electrocuted mutant. And so from this point, we see the third voice of Deadpool come into play again as Charles Xavier begins to address Deadpool once more. And the third voice in Deadpool's head tells him that Charles Xavier wants to talk now, that it's never been very easy for Charles Xavier to read the mind of Deadpool, and that hopefully somehow Charles Xavier will attempt to connect with Deadpool, and that Deadpool should let him do that. And so what we see is Deadpool continuing to converse with Charles Xavier, and again, touching on what it is that he thinks he knows, or believes that he knows, as far as something that nobody else is aware of. And what he says is that everybody had thought that he was crazy. Everybody thought that he was insane because he broke the fourth wall, because he talked to basically the audience as far as his communication in the comic books. But what he says is that once Psycho Man had entered his head, that he began to see everything clearly. He began to understand exactly where he stood and what all was going on here. But again, he doesn't go in depth into what it is that he knows. He doesn't go in depth in telling us exactly what it is that he's figured out. We're just kind of left to guess at this point in time. But what we see is that Charles Xavier tells Deadpool that he's had enough, that he's not going to let Deadpool kill anybody else, and that he's going to shut his mind down. And this is when we see Charles Xavier actually entering the mind of Deadpool. And when he does, he realizes what it is that Deadpool knows, and it ends up costing the life of Charles Xavier when he goes into a catatonic state, when his brain shuts down. And so from here, we see that Deadpool gives us an explanation of sorts involving some of the other characters in the X-Men, villains and superheroes alike. And of course we learn that Magneto had been killed by Deadpool when he was, I guess he is in a room or in some kind of a case that's filled with an acidic gel, which of course is eaten away at the body of Magneto and killed him. But what we also see is that Kitty Pryde is stuck in some kind of weird physics experiment, which of course Deadpool tells us he doesn't understand much about physics or tesseracts, but that it seems as though whatever this cage is in, that Kitty Pryde is trapped in, that she's not going to be able to escape, that she's going to be effectively stuck in this thing forever. And so from here we see that Wolverine has arrived, that he had apparently survived the explosion at Avengers Mansion and has come looking for Deadpool. And as Wolverine is making his way through the building, he comes across Arcade. And of course Arcade is a villain who was a big part of the X-Men history, albeit in a smaller scale, but he was a character who had constantly made all different kinds of death traps in an effort to kill the X-Men. And so when he realizes Wolverine's there, he tells Wolverine he has to get him out of there, that Deadpool is totally insane, that Deadpool has started forcing Arcade to make all different kinds of death traps and devices that are totally out of this world, that are things that Arcade himself would have never dreamed of, simply because it was too extreme. But what Wolverine says is that every single time he's ever come into contact with Arcade, that Arcade has always tried to kill Wolverine and the X-Men. And so Wolverine's not going to rescue Arcade, and instead, he's simply just going to kill them. And so from here, after Arcade is presumably left for his own death, we pick up with Dakin and X-23. And what Wolverine is told by Deadpool as Deadpool arrives behind Wolverine is that the healing factors of Dakin and X-23 were something that were difficult to deal with. And so Deadpool dealt with their healing factors in the same way that he would deal with his own. And what he's done here is he has them hooked up to flamethrowers and computer monitors. And the flamethrowers, of course, are constantly burning their bodies, but they stop after a time. And what the flamethrowers do is they reactivate whenever the computer detects that the healing factors of Dakin and X-23 are coming back into play again. But from here, we transition to Deadpool as he's officially confronting Wolverine. And Deadpool is apparently wearing the pelt of Beast. He's taken Beast and stripped him of his skin, of his fur, and is wearing it as he's fighting against Wolverine. And of course, what he tells Wolverine here is that he's a hunter, that he feels like a hunter with the garb that he's wearing, that he's a samurai mountain man. And of course, Wolverine is not having any of the guff that Deadpool is spewing here. And so again, as the two of them begin to engage in conflict, Deadpool tells Wolverine that he's wielding a carbonadium sword, and that while Wolverine does have a healing factor, that the carbonadium sword basically wreaks havoc. It keeps Wolverine's healing factor from being able to manifest. It keeps him from being able to heal from his wounds. And so again, we see that Deadpool starts to tear into Wolverine, starts to attack him once more. But what Deadpool also says here is that Wolverine's mutant power is not his healing factor, it's his popularity. It's the fact that he doesn't die due to his healing factor. It's the fact that he doesn't die because people that ride him don't want him to die. And what this does, what Deadpool is basically telling us here, is that the big secret that he's discovered is that they're all characters being written in a comic book, that they have no real control over themselves, and that Deadpool is the one person who's come to realize this absolute fact. And so again, as we continue with the story, we pick up with Taskmaster. And Taskmaster is at the home of Doctor Strange, and he's investigating and going through and looking at what's going on here. Of course, again, his tracking of Deadpool has led him to this location. And what we learn is that Deadpool had killed both Wong and Doctor Strange by presumably decapitating Wong and stabbing Doctor Strange through the heart. But as Taskmaster's going through the building, he realizes that Deadpool simply didn't just kill them arbitrarily, that Deadpool was looking for something. And Taskmaster realizes what it was that Deadpool was looking for when he comes across a book that shows him the nexus of all realities, indicating that Deadpool is perhaps attempting to find a way to escape this reality. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know. And I will catch you guys later. Peace.
YouTube, that's right. YouTube. Oh, I love Deadpool. I love him. He'd never had me, of course. I'm no B. Arthur, so. But good Lord, he was wearing Beast. He was wearing Beast. And let me get this right. The most powerful telepath in the world died just going into his head. I mean, brain dead, anyways. Come on, how awesome is that? Did you like that?
Like that.
You like that? Yeah?
What? YouTube.
Alright, we'll catch you on part 4. That'll be coming out in one of my next installments. Tell me what you thought in the comments. You know, did you like Deadpool? Did you like the return of my co-host?
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember, like, share, and subscribe. And say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.